I want to talk about what is cybersecurity compliance and how do I achieve it? So cybersecurity compliance, we're going to take a look at three different areas. One is understanding basic cybersecurity best practices. The second thing is understanding industry, federal, and state and industry regulations and laws that may affect you or may have you forced to be cybersecurity compliant. And the third thing is we're going to understand the NIST cybersecurity framework, which NIST stands for National Institute of Standards and Technology. It's an organization that's funded by the government and administered by academia, and they're responsible for making standards. A lot of times they operate in the background. Nobody really knows who they are, but if they're the reason why a USB is a USB and fits into all devices, as well as many other things that they kind of have built a standard on how people need to do it. So understanding basic cybersecurity best practices. So the first things you need to worry about when you're trying to implement best practices with cybersecurity is you need to identify your most valuable assets. And then the second thing you're going to want to do is protect your most valuable assets. And the third thing is you're going to want to respond and recover to an incident. Now, I use the term most valuable asset, and basically that means what's important to you. And to most business owners, that's protecting your customers' information. It's protecting some proprietary information that you may have. Maybe it's a secret sauce to, grandma's cookie recipe. Maybe it's some intellectual property. Maybe you have found a way to streamline some process and do it twice as good as all your competitors, and you really don't want anybody else to get their hands on that information. But we're going to focus on those being the valuable assets. So the way you want to protect those is pretty much the same. So the first thing in identifying your assets, this could be people, information, and devices. You have everything from, on the people side, you have employees, you have customers, you have third-party vendors. Information-wise, you have personally identifiable information, you have protected health information, you have controlled unclassified information if you're working with the government. You may have legal documents, taxes, accounting information, employee records. All these documents contain information that should be protected: people's social security numbers, people's bank account numbers, financial data, things like that. On the device side, you have routers, servers, computers, mobile devices, and then you have software itself. And whether that's third-party software that you've purchased or that's software that you've had custom made for you that's very proprietary, it's still, you want to have protections on those. So now that you've identified all that, the next thing you want to do is try to protect it. And the way you're going to protect it is basic cybersecurity principles kind of fall into several areas: password security, two-factor authentication, and access controls. These are where a certain, like with the access controls, I use an example of like the dentist. You go into a dentist office and they collect a lot of information about you, but the dentist itself, him or her, they don't need your credit card number. All they need is your patient information. And the opposite is true in the back office. The ladies in the back office don't need any of your medical information. They're doing the billing. All they need is your credit card number. So controlling who has access to which pieces of information is critical, because that helps keep your data contained in case there is a breach. If somebody hacks into the dentist's computer, he doesn't get all the credit cards won't get exposed because he didn't have access to that information. And then the other thing you can do to protect yourself is encrypt hard drives and folders and files. It's usually encryption methods vary, depends on how much information you're talking about, whether you want to encrypt your entire drive or just certain folders. And then sending secure emails and using VPNs is another way you can protect yourself. A lot of times, especially in the financial industry, I'm sure we've all gone through it before. If you buy a house or do any major real estate transactions, your mortgage company is hitting you up every day. Send me a copy of this bank statement. Send me a credit card report. Send me the last time you paid this bills. Fill out this form that's got everything you've ever known on it, or give me a copy of your last 3 years' taxes. and you end up just emailing them to them as general attachments. And that's not really safe. Those things should be encrypted when they're in transit because they contain everything. If you think about it, a tax form has all of your personal information, social security numbers on everybody in your family, birthdays of everybody in your family. You want to get paid faster, so you gave them your bank account number for direct deposit. I mean, there's everything you need in there to ruin your life is on one piece of paper. So that should definitely be protected. Making your old computer hard drives unreadable. If you have old computers, you got the old Windows XP computers you finally got rid of in the back of the office. You can't just drop those off to a thrift shop, recycle center, or throw them in the dumpster because somebody could get that hard drive and pull all the data off of it. So you need to make sure that those drives are wiped correctly so that the information is unreadable again. And that way it keeps your information contained. Endpoint detection and response, that's kind of the new buzzword for antivirus, anti-malware, anti-phishing, anti-spam, anti-ransomware. They kind of got sick of calling all these different things anti-something, so they finally come up with a big name that encompasses all of it together, and it's just called endpoint detection and response. And the other thing you want to make sure that is up and running properly. It doesn't matter specifically what brand, whether it's Bitdefender or Trend Micro or McAfee or one of the other big ones, Norton, or you're using what came with Windows, as long as you have something in place. And then security patches are definitely another big issue. You want to focus on that. You want to make sure that your software, specifically your operating system, but all the software on your computer isn't too far out of date, because they routinely send security patches. And if you have a piece of software that is on your computer and it hasn't been updated in a year or two, and out in the hacker world, everybody knows how to get into it with a certain exploit, and they've sent out a patch for that, but you never bothered to install it, so you're still vulnerable. So that's the main reason why you need to keep up on your security patches. And the firewall, think of a firewall as like a bouncer standing at the door of the nightclub. That is the main entry point into your system. It is the number one thing that's blocking traffic coming in and out of your router and into your computer. And so those firewalls need to be on, and they need to be set to the tightest security settings that you can get away with and still do your job. And backing up your data, there's several different kinds of backups. You'll hear some buzzwords like mirrors and cloning, or some of them are called incremental backups. And the differences in them, one backs up your entire hard drive, the other one backs up certain important software, and other ones, the incremental ones, only back up the things that have changed since the last backup, so it doesn't use as much space. So the recommendation is every depending on how much information you're actually collecting, but every so often you do a full backup, and then you just do incrementals daily, or even in real time, that constantly copy whatever files have been changed, and it keeps you up to date and current. Some other things to be aware of is USB drives, webcams, microphones, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. If you're not using these on your devices, you should leave them shut off. An example is, on your cell phone, if you're carrying your phone around and you're not actively using Bluetooth for your headset, don't have the Bluetooth on, because that's just another entry point that somebody could use to get into your phone or into your computer. Same thing with microphones and webcams. I've actually got a webcam cover that I use that's to block it completely when it's shut off. That way, even if somebody activates it remotely, they still can't see anything because it's covered. The same thing with microphones. You can leave those shut off if you're not in use. USB drives, you don't want to pick up some USB drive that was somebody left laying around and put it into your computer, because it may have malware on it. And then the last thing is mobile device managers. So mobile device managers are important if you have people that use their own devices or have a lot of company-owned assets out floating around. So like an example may be if you're working in like air conditioning and heating business where you've got 20 different techs out driving around all day with iPads, and you need to be able to rapidly update software or take control of those devices to add things or delete things from them. Having a mobile device manager lets you control all those devices at once instead of having to wait until they bring them back to the shop and do them one at a time. So now that we've kind of taken a look at what you need to protect your assets, the respond and recover from incidents, basically the thing that I like to use is risk management. The government pushes this very heavily. Matter of fact, most of the Department of Defense runs off of risk management. And basically, we all use risk management every day in our own personal lives. You just don't think of it that way. But if you wake up late for work and you're, 15 minutes late for work, and now you've got a decision to make. Do you go to work 15 minutes late, or do you skip breakfast, or do you skip a shower and then make it to work on time? And then, people weigh these risks in their head all day long. Do you want to go to work without a shower? Can you make it till lunch? If you skip breakfast, maybe you're diabetic and you have to eat anyway. So now you have to, weigh that risk. And it's like, what, I'll just be 15 minutes late. I have to do what I have to do. So we make these decisions all the time. And what we like to do is apply these to a business, because sometimes the things that you need to do to keep your information safe, the value of doing that and the consequence of something happening if it doesn't, if there is a data breach, may or may not be enough to warrant taking action on it. So it's kind of a risk-based decision on what you're going to actually implement for mitigations to the vulnerabilities that could keep you safe. But what you want to do with a recovery and response plan is, after you've kind of weighed the risk of keeping that in mind as you're going through the plan, you want to have a plan for every possible incident. COVID was a perfect example. I don't think anybody's incident response plan ever in 2019 and before ever addressed what if the government tells us to shut our business and go home. And now I think most businesses probably have that plan in place of what if this happens again. But what if there's a hurricane? What if there's a tornado? What if there's a fire that burns a building down? You have all these great backups, but the backup hard drives are sitting on the same desk as your computer. So if your office catches on fire, you just lost all your data anyways. So these are all things to think about of what are you going to do if these things happen? Who's in charge of calling somebody to get something taken care of? Who's responsible for collecting information? Who's responsible to go out into social media and let all your customers know what's going on? Who's responsible for getting everybody back into the office after it's over with and starting the recovery efforts? These are all things that you want to think about ahead of time and kind of have written down. We all joke around about, plans are not worth anything because they all fall apart as soon as they happen. But the act of you actually thinking about all those things and putting it in writing will help you be able to be prepared when it does happen. Even if it doesn't go according to your plan, you at least have thought about all the contingency things and you have some information written down to be ready to respond. And that's the main key. The second thing to that is you need to test your plan. Come into work one day and just pretend, hey, we're just going to pretend like the building caught on fire. Everybody go across the street and hang out at the park, and we're going to try and run our operations from there and see if we can actually do it like we thought we could or not. And that's where you find all the holes you had in your plan, of things you forgot about or things that don't work the way you thought. And then that helps you to adjust your plan accordingly and be ready to go. So those are the basic principles of understanding the basic principles of cybersecurity. So now what we want to take a look at is what kind of industry, federal, and state regulations affect this area. So one thing that affects almost every business is the payment card industry's data security standard, the PCI DSS. Anybody who uses Visa, MasterCard, Discover, or any other credit card payment form has to be compliant with PCI. Now, a lot of businesses will use a third party, PayPal, Square, their own banks, things that collects the credit card information for them so they can kind of be hands off. That doesn't eliminate your risk of having to be PCI compliant. It just helps you mitigate what you need to do because somebody else is taking care of it for you, but you still need to have a PCI compliance. There's a questionnaire you fill out, and according to what answers you have on there, it tells you what you need to do to be compliant. The next one that's a big one is the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act for anybody who's in the financial industry, and then there's HIPAA for anybody in the medical industry. These are congressional mandated cybersecurity things that you need to do to become compliant. And then the other thing on the federal level is the risk management framework. And if you're considering getting into the federal contracting arena, there's the FISMA, Federal Information Security Modernization Act, that basically dictates how you handle information inside the government. The NIST 800-171, that is basically had been kind of renamed as the CMMC 2.0, which we will discuss in the next webinar. And the DFARS, the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation and Supplements, that is the list of requirements for government contracts and government contractors and subcontractors. And the cybersecurity maturity model certification, the CMMC that I just stated previously, that's basically the same as the NIST 800-171 is the list of things, the list of controls you have to meet for cybersecurity. And CMMC is the framework that kind of facilitates you meeting those requirements from the 800 series. And then there are state regulations in this area. Colorado has a Privacy Act already, and New Mexico has 2 or 3 years in a row now put one up at the legislature, but it has not actually been passed yet. So as of now, there is no Privacy Act or consumer protection policies for the state of New Mexico, but I imagine in the next couple of years there will be. And if you do business nationwide, there's 4 or 5 other states, Virginia, Florida, California, and Utah, I think, that also have state regulations telling you that you have to protect a consumer's information in a certain way, or let them opt out of certain things, or have publicly listed on your website what you're going to collect from them and how you're going to use it. So just be aware, depending on what state you're doing business in, as to what these state regulations will tell you need to do. So all these things that we just discussed. So how do I comply with all these regulations and how these laws? How do you track, 5 or 6 different regulations that may affect you, and make sure that you're in compliance? So the easy way to do this is by using the NIST cybersecurity framework. So it's basically a set of cybersecurity controls and policies that are broken into areas, functional areas, to make it easier to implement and to kind of make it make sense. And these are identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover, which we kind of basically just went over what identify and protect. The detect is actually your antivirus and things like that working. Respond is you responding, and recover is after the incident, you're recovering from it. So we're going to go over those in a little bit more detail. Actually, before we get started on that, is there any questions from anybody? No? Okay. So understanding the NIST CSF and those 5 sections. So basically, identify is where you do an assessment questionnaire and you identify where you are in cybersecurity maturity process. And then you also identify your critical processes and any of your assets. You document information flows, your hardware inventory, software inventory. You identify in writing certain people that are responsible for certain job functions and roles that they play in a cybersecurity incident. And you also have to identify the threats and vulnerabilities, and that kind of falls into that risk piece of what's, if you're in central New Mexico, the risk of a hurricane is probably pretty low. On the other hand, the consequence, if we ever did get one, is probably pretty high because nobody here has a roof that's made to withstand 175-mile-an-hour winds. So I'm just using that as an example. And so that's something that you would document. And then with risk, you would probably say, well, it's not worth it to put 175-mile-an-hour roof on my house because the wind never gets that high. So you would just deal with it. And then there may be some other things like dust storms and floods and things like that that are going to happen, that the consequences are pretty high and the likelihood is very high. So that is definitely something that you would want to go ahead and spend the extra money or time or effort to protect yourself from. And then you also list your cybersecurity vulnerabilities in there. And that's where you need kind of a professional to help you with that. But you look at, what's the risk of somebody accidentally clicking the wrong button and deleting your database? What's the risk of somebody spilling a cup of coffee on a laptop and taking out, and making their laptop unusable, but then was that the only laptop that contained that certain information in it and you didn't have a backup? Or what's the what's the likelihood or the consequences if an external bad actor hacks into your network and steals a copy of all of your clients' personal information, including their social security numbers or things like that. So those are all things that you want to document and kind of assess what you're going to do about it. And then the next thing is you're going to protect all those things. Now that you know what they are, you can get a better idea of what you need to do to protect those. And you kind of have a priority list of what you're going to do first based on how high the risk was to that certain thing happening. And then once you have all your protections in place, you need to train users. I have that one at the bottom of the list. You need to train your users, all employees, on basic cybersecurity awareness and what to do if something does happen. That way, everybody in the organization is kind of on the same page with what the mission is to protect this information. And then, as I talked about before, the detection is basically having endpoint detection and response, and testing and updating your detection processes, maintaining logs so you know who's been in to which systems and had access to what information and when. In case there is a problem, you can go back and look and see who was in that system at that time and see if you can, it'll help kind of trace back to figure out exactly what went wrong. And then you need to know the data flow for your enterprise. How do you get this customer's credit card? Do you send them a link to some website that they can go in and enter it in? Or do they call your customer service person on the phone and give it to them and they write it down on a sticky note and then they go to some computer and type it in? And now you got a sticky note, you got a shred. You kind of just need to know where this information flows through your system so that you can see where it needs protected the most, and possibly streamline your system a little bit so that there's not as many people involved. And the last thing is understanding the impact of a cybersecurity event would have, and which kind of flows into the response section. So responding to an incident, obviously, the preferred method is you had a plan already, and all you have to do is pull out your plan and implement it. The other things you want to do is you want to make sure that you have what we call after action reports. So take lots of notes after a whole thing is over with, get your team together and go over, hey, what went right, what went wrong, what do we need to fix before the next time this happens? Let's figure out exactly what it was that happened and document it, so that you can analyze that and find a way to reduce the risk of it happening again. And then the final section is on the recovery. So now that it's over with and the incident's done, you need to make sure that you're able to recover from this. And that's where usually you have a disaster recovery plan or a business continuity plan in place. And those plans are going to be focused on maybe running your business from it depends on whether, you know, if it's a cyber incident and you're back up and running by the end of the day, it's no big deal. If it was a fire that burned down your office, do you have a secondary location you can run the operations out of? Do you have the ability to telework so you can just send everybody home? Do you have extra computers in case those are all destroyed and now you need to use a different laptop? These are all things that you need to think about ahead of time and kind of have a plan worked out so that when it comes time to recover, you can actually implement that plan. And you want to ensure recovery plans are updated based on, you know, newer information of things that are going right, things that are going wrong. And then the last thing is managing public relations. So especially after a data breach, you've got to spend a little bit of time and money and effort into making sure that you get a hold of all your customers and explain what went wrong and what you're doing to fix it and what you're doing to make sure it never happens again, to regain their trust. Because if we all think about it, you know, when you hear that, you know, 50 million credit card numbers were compromised at Target stores, the first thing that goes through your mind is, I'm never going shopping at Target again. So this is one of those things where you have to be able to react and you have to be able to explain what you did in a relevant way to the public to gain their trust and confidence to get them to come back. Otherwise, you are going to get a bad reputation and lose a lot of customers. Okay, so we're getting close to the end here. So the next steps are, we're going to have another webinar where we're going to take a deep dive into what the CMMC 2.0 is and what requirements you have to do to meet that. And we'll learn how to build a plan of attack and milestones, which is basically documenting all the things that you've determined that need to be addressed that pose a risk to your business operations and protecting information. And you kind of document what you're going to do about it, how long it's going to take to get it done, and who's responsible for making sure it happens. And then we're going to also talk about understanding the actual certification process of becoming compliant. And these are all leading towards a government contract. So if you're interested in getting government contracts, this is going to be some good information for you. And with that, does anybody have any questions? And then I'm going to show my, while we're waiting on questions, I'm going to flip over. So there's my contact information if anybody needs to get a hold of me, or you can go through Sophia and Fran can both send you in my direction as well. I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay, seems like we don't have questions until now. So if you guys come up with any questions later, please just reach out to me or Todd. We will share the presentation after. And of course, it's being recorded, so you I will post it on our YouTube channel so you guys can check the recording if you missed something. So if we will also offering through Todd one-on-one consultations for free. So if you're interested on that, please let me know. Just reach out to me via email and I can, you know, put you in contact with Todd and you guys can have that one-on-one consultation on specific topics about cybersecurity. Yeah, with him. So, okay, so it seems like we don't have any questions in the Q&A section.
I have a question for everybody else. I guess it would stir a comment. How many of you guys have some sort of cybersecurity in place already, or are you trying to figure out what you need to do to get it started?
Come on.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Awesome.
you.
I am establishing. Hi, Todd. How you doing, man? I appreciate your insight. Very informational and very something that I will use in my own business. I am starting a cybersecurity business to get into government contracting, and I would really like to have a one-on-one with you to kind of, pick your brain, best practices, ways to go about it, things to look out for, so to make sure that I'm most successful. So I would really appreciate an opportunity to kind of talk to you one-on-one.
Okay. Yeah, if you just contact Sophia, she can help you with that.
All right. Thanks a lot, Todd. I appreciate you. Thank you, Sophia.
What about anybody else? Is there anybody else having interest in getting their cybersecurity going, or are you guys or thinking about getting a government contract down the road and trying to prepare for it?
It seems like everyone else is shy.
Nobody wants to
Okay.
jump in. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so hope we get in some businesses that are interested on that one-on-one consultation, so I can send it your way. So thank you so much for the great information about cybersecurity. And yes, please don't miss our next webinar next Thursday at the same time, 12 p.m. So thank you so much and have everyone a wonderful day.
All right. Thank you, guys.